Welcome to What's on Your Bookshelf with your hosts, Denise Russo and Samantha Powell.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of What's on Your Bookshelf. This is our podcast where we are exploring the books on our shelves and talking about things like our passions, lifting the lids on our potential, and being able to really find and seek out our purpose in life. We've been walking through the book Coach Wooden by Pat Williams, the 7 principles that shaped his life and will change yours. And this is a multi-part series that we are in. So today we are continuing on with the principles. We are in principle number 3, which is make each day your masterpiece. If you haven't listened to the previous episodes, it's okay. Stay with us. You don't have to listen to the past ones to catch up to the future ones. But if you were someone that was listening in, if you recall the last time, we talked about 5 ways to take control of your day. And today we're going to round out by talking about 2 final topics. Each day investing in others and never leaving anything unsaid. My name is Denise Russo, and today I am joined once again by Sam Powell, and we're looking forward to spending some time together as we explore mastering each day, including today, as a masterpiece. Sam, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm excited to finish out the Making Each Day Your Masterpiece section. I can't believe it's taken us 3 episodes to get through it, but there was so much goodness in this one that I'm glad we broke it apart to do all the individual pieces justice. So I'm excited to wrap that up before we move on to the next one next week.
That sounds good. So what's on your mind for this part of the chapter?
Oh, yeah. So this one's really interesting. So the first subsection in this chapter is each day invest yourself in others. And I love the semantics of that, right? It's not each day invest in others, it's invest yourself in others. And there's just something about the way that's written to me that really calls to being present and really taking yourself and everything that you bring to the table and giving it to other people. And I like the word invest, right? It's how can I put that deposit in the piggy bank between you and I, right? How can I give you something that's going to help you help me better, either in our relationship or separately or whatnot. So I love the first and foremost, just the semantics of this subheading, because there's something about it that is really, really present to me, which I thought was interesting. I don't know. Did you pick up on that at all? Was that something that occurred to you? I'm kind of I don't know. I always hone in on, how things are worded.
I really love how you're describing it, because I think last time we were talking about the difference in investing, spending, and wasting money, and investing and spending and wasting time. And the way you just worded it made me think about how we may often say, like, yeah, I'm going to go spend time with my family this weekend. But to just change that little bit to talking about investing. And I love how you also picked out just that simple second word of yourself. So you can invest time, but if you invest yourself in the time with others, how much more active and proactive and deep can that really be?
Exactly. There was just something about the phrasing that really called to me as, when I'm thinking about making a day a masterpiece, it's really showing up in wholeness with somebody else, right? Really, like every single little bit, every quarter of who I am, showing up and really investing that in someone else. So not like I think about beauty, and just something about that, the way that that's phrased is, is really something incredible. And this subsection's got a couple of really interesting stories in it. The first one is about Valerie Condos Field, who was known as Miss Val, but she was the UCLA gymnastics coach. And the story talks about that. And I know that really called to you, Denise. I know you had some thoughts on that story. But when I think about, investing yourself in others, there's this little thing about that Miss Val explains. And one of the things that she talked about was, regardless of what event they were on, right, they being the gymnasts, or whether they're focusing on dance or gymnastic skills, the quality of their movement is what makes their movements come to life. And the story is really interesting, and I think you've got some good thoughts on the story itself, but I wanted to call that out because when I think about, making a day a masterpiece, when I think about investing myself in others, there's an aspect of quality to that. And I love that line. I highlighted it. It really doesn't have to do with investing yourself in others. But I think that there's something to that. When you invest, when you spend time, when you're painting a masterpiece, there's something about quality. And so when I think about if I was sitting down investing myself in somebody else, it would really be about quality time. And that makes me think a lot about, like that's some people's love language, right? If you think about that book, that's a great book. So anybody who's in any kind of relationship with any other human being, whether that be family or whatnot, but it's that when I spend time with you, I spend quality time with you, right? And the quality of the movement is what makes the movement come to life. And I just thought that was really, really beautiful and just a really, I don't know, interesting way to think about spending time with other people and giving to other people. But I know you had some thoughts on this whole Miss Val story. So, well, what did you think about it as you read through?
Well, something that you just said sparked a story that I'm thinking about that, and I want to talk about her, but this brought an idea to me about someone who I value greatly. There is a person in San Francisco named Diego. And years ago, this has got to be, oh my gosh, at least 10 years ago, if not more than 10 years ago. There was a time I was working for a company who had a headquarters in San Francisco. And so it was kind of like my second home. I was in California all the time, and my kids were little and in elementary school. And we often had an opportunity where they could come out on the tail end of my trip, and we would spend a long weekend in California. So beautiful. Oh my gosh. If I ever was able to have a second life or win the lottery, I would totally live in Sausalito. It's one of the most beautiful places ever. And any case, we were in South San Francisco this one time, and we were at a restaurant. It was an Italian restaurant. This is why it's so important that you never know how you're going to impact someone, okay? I remember Diego, but I don't remember the name of the restaurant. I sort of remember the food. It was nothing to really write home for, but the service was outstanding. Why was it outstanding? Vincent at that time, like I said, was in young elementary school age. And I remember the very first time that we met Diego, we were at the table, and typically I would recall at that age that servers would go around and maybe look at the parent and say, well, what is he or her having? Like, not acknowledging the kid. But Diego was different. Diego, on the first time we ever met him, he kneeled down next to Vincent. So he was eye level with him. And he asked him what he liked eating. And they started having a conversation. And then Diego noticed that at that particular day, Vincent was wearing a soccer jersey. And he mentioned, hey, do you play soccer? I play soccer. And they kicked up this conversation. Now, the restaurant was super busy. So it was in between the entire meal that Diego would continuously come back. And every time he came back to the table, he first acknowledged Vincent. He called him by name. He asked Vincent how he was enjoying his meal. He made some comment about soccer. Now, granted, yes, Diego went away that day with a really good tip because he made my son feel special. But what happened in that moment was that we decided we were always going to come back to this restaurant to seek him out. Well, maybe about the third or the fourth visit back to San Francisco and going to this restaurant and seeing Diego, by now he knows a little bit more about our family. And we called him up and said that we were going to be in town and would he be at the restaurant on whatever the days were we were going to be there. And he said no, but that he had something for Olivia and Vincent. And would it be okay for him to come to our hotel? Now, just think about that. Like, he was our server at a restaurant.
Yeah.
So Diego came to our hotel and he gave both kids Steph Curry jerseys and gave Vincent the book, The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. Now, when I got the book, I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to read this book first because my son is like 8 and this book doesn't look like an 8-year-old kind of a book. It was a little bit strange, but this guy was just an intuitive guy. So anyways, I ended up reading the book on the airplane on the way home and finished it within one sitting. It was that good. It is now absolutely in the top 5 of my most favorite books on my bookshelf, hands down. The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. But the point of the story is that this man, Diego, invested his time with Vincent doing something so simple. And it resulted in an encounter that created a friendship and actually gave me, like I said, personally, one of the top books on my bookshelf. And he didn't have to do any of that and went out of his way just to, like you said earlier, make a deposit into somebody that flourished into something so much better. So that story struck me when you were telling your story there.
I love that. And it's so funny, right? Like, because what I love in that is, Diego was investing in Vincent, in your children, but that in the investment there carried over to you. I had a similar thing happen to me in high school. My mom's childhood best friend, 60 years at this point, I think, decades and decades and decades of friendship. And when I was in high school, my mom's friend sent her a CD at that time, right? She thought my mom would really like it. My mom might have listened to it. I have no idea. I ended up stealing it. I downloaded it onto my, I think, iPod at the time or whatever. And that CD, the songs in that, I have used over and over and over again in my life, right? It wasn't much of an investment, but it was my mom's friend coming with something that touched her soul and investing just a little bit of herself in my mom. But that investment ended up to be a huge investment in me. I used this song in like a college senior year speech that I gave. I've come back to it at really troubled times in my life. I spoke at it at my son's funeral. I have used the words and the song so many times, but that investment wasn't actually made in me, right? Just like The Alchemist wasn't exactly made in you, it was made in Vincent. But sometimes those investments have that secondary path, and that's, something really, really amazing. And it's you giving something of yourself to someone else who then maybe passes that on to someone else. And gosh, what a beautiful world that creates when we're all giving these little pieces of ourselves away to each other. And that becomes the spark that does something amazing for somebody who then does something amazing for somebody else. And
yes,
my grandmother and I ended up bonding over songs on that CD, right? And this was 25 years after the fact that it happened. It's really incredible, but those little investments can just make such a big difference.
Oh, I love that. And I love that you also weaved in that it's about music. So you'll have to share with Scott the song so we can put it in the show notes and give everybody a listen. It makes me think about, songs are such an important part of my life. Music is such an important part of my life, but I often also reference things like movies and things that impact me. And it got me thinking about something you and I shared off the mic earlier. Yesterday, I took my kids to see the premiere of the live action version of The Little Mermaid. And Olivia was probably 5, I think, when she saw The Little Mermaid for the very first time. And she became the most enamored. She was Olivia's first Disney princess. She dressed up like her for multiple Halloweens and was anticipating this day so much yesterday. But I remember that when we found out that The Little Mermaid was getting ready to be made as a movie, there was a big production about it over at Disney World. And for those that listen in or that know me, know how much I love Disney. And we often spend a lot of our time and money, or I'm going to rephrase that, invest a lot of our time and money at Disney. And so when we found out that the movie was going to be made, Olivia loves to go to the park and do something called cosplay, which is sort of like you're dressed up as an adult, but you're not really dressed up exactly like the character. Well, I remember this one time I think we were in Epcot. We were in Epcot because I remember she did not want to go on the ride Soarin', which is one of my most favorites because I am not a big ride person, but I love the smells in that ride. And it's just such a magical ride. And so she stayed on the outside of the ride. Well, you never know what's happening when you're with someone, but you're not right in their presence. And while we were on the ride, Olivia that day was dressed up like the Little Mermaid. And it turns out that there was a little girl as she was coming out of the ride and we were walking toward Olivia. This little girl was also dressed up like the Little Mermaid, the same age Olivia was when she first found out about this princess. And instantly the little girl stopped and just like was frozen, no pun intended, well, maybe a little bit, but she was frozen and staring at Olivia. And she looked at her mom and she looked at Olivia and she looked at her mom and she looked at Olivia. And Olivia did the same thing Diego did for Vincent. She bent down and started talking with this little girl. And the little girl started to just be so happy. And she hugged her. They took a picture with each other. Olivia was crying. It was just absolutely beautiful. And that day we ended up walking through a couple other parks in Disney Springs, and we lost count at around number 50 of people making a comment about how Olivia was dressed that particular day. And for her, it was bringing to life that character that she so much appreciated had become part of her. And then she was able to then pass it along to other people. So watching that movie yesterday was just so special for us because you could see that it was that this something that you never know how you're going to impact somebody else, right? Like here's an animated character that impacted my daughter. Disney doesn't know every person that their movies and their music impact, but they certainly know the secret formula for how to do it well. And so that was something that happened to us yesterday, but it got me thinking about that this is a time of transition. That movie went from one form and one transition into this other type of form, another transition into an evolution, if you will. And one of the things in the book that Coach Val did so well was that she was known not just as a successful coach, but she was a person of excellence. And she would often talk to her team, especially when they were in times of transition, whether they were losing and then winning, or whether they were new to the team or graduating. And in fact, now is a time of season where lots of kids are graduating. Both my kids are going to all kinds of graduation parties and such. And this is that time of transition, even for you and I, from one career into this new evolution for what we're building together and separately. And so what stood out for me in this chapter, Sam, was that Val said to her team that going to class and studying isn't about making the grade, but enriching your knowledge to help make living your life more colorful. And I loved that so much because what it said to me is that no matter what you do, who you're with, or how you go about your day, it's more than just the surface of that thing, whether you're reading a book or watching a movie, listening to a song, being with your team, or leading a group. It's not just about the surface of making the grade, but really going deeper and enriching your knowledge to help make living your life more colorful.
Yeah, I love that. I absolutely love that. And I think that, that's the kind of thing that if you pay attention to your life, if you pay attention to the movements that you go through, the interactions that you have, and you look at it almost from like a third party lens, right? Like look at not just, yes, okay, I'm sitting here learning calculus, but what am I really learning how to do? I'm learning how to problem solve. I'm learning how to, face something that's way intimidating for me potentially and sit in it. Or I'm embracing something that I love and I think is wonderful. And like, oh my gosh, what else could I do with that? Or, I wonder if this, applies to something else that I do, really enjoy in life, if it doesn't resonate with you. But that thought process of, it's really about learning in itself, right? It's not about the grades, right? And that's something, I went to a liberal arts college, and that was one of the things I was just telling somebody about it yesterday, is that the school really invested in us in a way that was around learning and lifelong learning, and really the love of lifelong learning. And my degrees in mathematics, I am not using that outside of like general, keeping track of my finances at this point. Like I don't utilize that, but I utilize that lesson in learning, and that it wasn't about the grades necessarily, but it was about the process of thinking that I learned, and process of, having a healthy debate with a peer about, really thinking and growing and, taking that beyond. And I love that. I love that too. And that was that, as we hear over and over again in this book about Coach Wooden, his investment of himself in the players, the coaches, the people, the mentees around him, helped people get that same love of learning, of thinking, of growing, of, really, enriching and creating and making a more colorful life, because he sat with them, he invested himself in them, and then they were able to take those bigger lessons, on and forward, right? How many people take these 7 principles and, and are using it in their life? And it's not because he was preaching them, it was because he was showing them in that investment that he made of himself and other people. And it was just really, it brought the color to people's life. It was really amazing, really, really amazing.
I love what you're saying there, because we see time and again on every page, whether it's a coach who is mentored by Coach Wooden or whether it was a player, never do we see in the book, hey, this is how he taught me how to dribble better, or this is how he taught me to throw this certain shot a certain way. The lessons from these coaches, and especially from Coach Wooden, weren't just on the mechanics of a sport, and yet that's what they were being paid to do in their career. It was about how to lead in the game of life, which I think as people leaders, we are all called to that. In fact, Sam, you've recently transitioned to creating an entire company around this concept. So why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about what inspired you to take the concepts from sports and actually create something that can help leaders on and off the court?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what it really comes down to. And it's kind of what we're talking about here, is this thought process of, if you take a step back from the dribbling and the shooting and the running and the passing and the jumping, all of that aspect of sports and, the actual sport itself, and you look at it a little more existentially, a little more third party, right, viewing your own life, what you realize is that those skills are teaching you so much more, right? As I'm showing up to practice every day, as I'm competing in games, as I'm making mistakes in real time, having to correct them and having to persevere and having to push forward and having to set goals and work, incrementally towards those goals. These are the same skills that help us win at the game of life, right? And really lead in that space, whether it's the life we lead or whether it's leading other people. It's helping you really understand and do that. And what I love about sports is that it gives you that space, and has been doing research in all of this, it's that participation that in an activity, right? And it doesn't have to be, it can be any kind of game, right? You can play it to a board game, video games, same kind of thing. When you're sitting there competing, it's the pressure's on, it's real life, it's, that kind of a thing. It gives you the experience and the opportunity to try out all these skills, to build them. And what people don't realize is they often think, oh, I'm sitting here, I'm playing volleyball, and this is what I'm doing. But what you don't realize is everything you're doing as you're doing that are building you skills that you learn later, right? And we see this, I think, unconsciously move forward, and it ends up being the reason people say, oh, everyone should do sports as a kid, I get that, because most of the people sitting as CEOs of Fortune 500 companies played some kind of youth sport. And sometimes, a lot of times they went on to be really competitive into, college and things like that. But what it really comes back around to is that when you can get this opportunity, and competition gives you the opportunity, and practicing for a competition gives you the opportunity to practice all of these skills over and over again. But when you can recognize and translate those skills into the business world, the teaching world, whatever world you end up in as an adult, there's so much richness and color and vastness. And, and it's the chapter, this book, it says, both coaches teach more than a sport. They teach life. And if you look at, and that's the thing that's super interesting to me, if you look at sports, it's really giving you the skills to lead yourself, right? Lead your life or lead others. And, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, because it's so fascinating and it's so great. Because I think so many people can really attach that. Everybody plays some kind of game, like I said, whether it's a sport, a board game, a video game, whatever, we're all doing it. So it's super, super, super interesting. And it's funny, it reminds me the next story in this chapter, right after the Miss Val story, is Brooks Laich, who is a Canadian board center on the Washington Capitals. And in 2010, they went to the playoffs with the best record in the NHL. And then in the first 4 games of the quarterfinals against the Canadiens, the Capitals took this lead, but then the Canadiens came back and won the next 3 games, right? So the Capitals go in, they think they're, the people who should be winning this, and then they get knocked out of the playoffs. But as was leaving the arena, right, he's feeling super defeated. I mean, right, there's no more defeated of a moment when you're in the playoffs. You should have won. You got kicked out. He's driving home, and a woman and her teenage daughter were on the side of the road, flat tire, I think. And he stopped, helped them, figured out they were both Capitals fans as they were talking, and they recognized him. And the first thing he did was apologize to them for disappointing them, right? Like this investment of oh gosh, I've disappointed these people. But he sat there, he helped them, whatever, right? And then he drove off and he went home, right? So in this moment of utter loss, utter defeat, right, where he's done all this competition and did not come out victorious, he stops to invest some of himself in these other people, right? Not only in let me help you fix your tire and get you on your way, but also let me connect with you in the sports space that we're both in, right? I'm so sorry that I disappointed you, as losing. And then the story blew up, right? I think the girl went home and, put it out there on social media. And then the next thing you knew, everyone's praising this guy as, amazing and, all of that. And that kind of is the part that wraps up this chapter, because Coach Wooden is quoted as saying at the end is, you have not lived a perfect day until you've done something for somebody who cannot repay you. It comes right off of this story of this hockey player. And right, those people couldn't do anything to repay him, but he took this, what would have been a really, bad day, and ended it by investing himself in somebody else. And that's the story, right? This is the story that made it into this book for all, in perpetuity. And, I think it's just amazing, but it's that you can't get to a masterpiece. You can't get to that perfect day until you've invested yourself in someone else. And it's just such an interesting concept for me. And I love all the examples and the stories. And I love that Olivia was the perfect little mermaid for all these girls. And I saw the pictures. She was like the Little Mermaid. Her hair was perfect. Her makeup was on point. Her outfit was adorable. And I bet, especially the younger kids, what they're going to remember is they met the Little Mermaid. To them, your daughter will be the Little Mermaid. Yes. Right? They met her in real life at Disney. That will be such a magical thing for them, right? And her taking that time to invest, really took this day that you guys had that was super great already, I don't know, knocked it into that masterpiece category because of all this investment in other people. And that's such a beautiful thing.
They always say that Disney is the most magical place on earth or the happiest place on earth, but it's because of the people and the experiences, like you said. And the story that you were just sharing about Lake, it's interesting because it sort of made me think about a story that maybe sounds parallel, but completely different and opposite. Have you ever heard of a guy named Jimmy McGill?
No.
Okay. So Jimmy McGill is not a real person. He's an actor, or that's the name of a character in a television show. And the television show is called Better Call Saul. And Better Call Saul is a spin-off of a television show called Breaking Bad. Now, what's so funny about thinking about this story is it has nothing to do with good quality leadership. It's literally a television show about two guys who were down in their luck and ended up creating drugs and selling them and becoming multi-uber rich. And then I won't give the spoilers for anybody who hasn't seen the show, but Jimmy McGill is later in the show. It turns out he's a lawyer. Okay. But he is a person that is always down on his luck. Like you were talking about how in the story they were losing. In this guy's story, he's constantly losing cases, losing money, losing confidence, losing friendships. But one of the things that was so interesting as I've been following along his story is that despite loss and defeat and not being victorious and being continuously disappointed, one thing that was consistent about Jimmy McGill, who later is called Saul Goodman, is that he ends up in the story whenever someone is down on their luck, he's the first one there to help them. There was this one scene I was watching recently where his colleague ended up getting in a car accident. And so the first thing he did was not just go to the hospital and see if she was okay, but he went with her to the place where the car accident happened. And while she was sitting in the car, he gathered up all the things that flew out of the car. He also has another brother who is extremely contradictory to him, doesn't like him, doesn't respect him, doesn't love him, and is also a lawyer who is trying in the show to completely break him down to the point where he even got his ability to be a lawyer taken away from him. But Jimmy, no matter what, always was there for his brother. Despite anything that the brother was doing against him, he was always there investing in his brother. He would be there in the middle of the night. He would be there throughout the day. Even at the darkest times of his brother trying to tear down his character, he was there helping him. And it sort of made me think about, well, there's so much in the show that actually are such great leadership lessons. I would definitely say it's not on a bookshelf. It's in my Roku device, I guess you could say. It's on Netflix. It's called Better Call Saul. I'll share with you before we segue into the next part. What's so funny about it is I never put two and two together of why in the beginning of the show were they calling him Jimmy? Because in Breaking Bad, his name is Saul Goodman. That's his name in the show. And so at one point in the show, it says that he's talking to somebody and he's down on his luck. And he looks over at the friend and he just says, you know what? It's all good, man. And he just then kind of got that phrase going, and that ended up becoming his name. Now, I don't know yet why, because I'm not that far in the season to find out when it officially became his name. But when you think about that, is that he spent every day looking at the bright side, even when it was dark. And he ended it by just saying, it's all good, man. It's all good, man. And so he also was the type of a person in this character that he never left anything unsaid, no matter what it was that needed to be said. If it was something hard to be said, if it was something loving to be said, he didn't kind of let the sun go down and not say something. And so this segue into this chapter really talks about this, that when you have a chance, which we all have a chance while we're still breathing, to not let something go unsaid, to do it, and how important it makes people feel. Like I shared about the story about Olivia bending down to the little girl, or Diego bending down to Vincent, or how many times people have reached out to me to just say, I'm thinking about you today, and how that makes you feel when someone acknowledges you. And I know that this part of the chapter meant a lot to you as well, and you have a couple of stories. So how about we segue into this last part of the chapter, which is not leaving anything unsaid and letting people know.
Yeah. I'm because I've become such a big advocate of this recently, and making sure that people really know. And I don't exactly know where it came from. Honestly, it probably came from other people investing in me and saying what they will. But, this is the quote at the end of this. It's the end of the whole chapter, but it's the end of this section, is that Coach had a thought about what he wanted to say. He made a decision that on that day, he was going to tell me exactly how he felt about our friendship. He wasn't going to leave anything unsaid that ought to be said. And I just think that is such a powerful thing, right? When I think about making a day a masterpiece, that's got to be the thing that I close the chapter with, right? Like close the day with is, we talk about the power of gratitude so much, and we get into all of that later in this book, but it's so important to let people know, right? When, you could have all the most wonderful thoughts, wonderful ideas in the world, but if you never put them out there, then it's as if they never happened, right? Mm-hmm. So if I can think all the most wonderful things about the people around me, the people who matter to me, the people who are so important to me, but I never tell them, it's as if I don't have those thoughts, really. Like I might, but, really thinking about it. So what I found myself doing, and I still something I want to be so much better at, but it is I wax and wane here, but when I think about someone, when somebody crosses my mind, or they tell me a story, it's just send that person a quick text and say, hey, I'm thinking of you, or hey, I really appreciate this, right? I find myself telling stories of other people, and I'm talking about it, but afterwards take that minute to send them a text and say, I was just telling somebody the story of when you did this or I did that or whatever, right? Because we find that in the stories that people come back to us with, we can really find ourselves, right? And so that's where I think it also comes back around to investing yourself in other people is leaving nothing unsaid, right? Is telling somebody the thing that you think about them, right? Or the way that they've impacted you. I recently was doing this with I was recently having a conversation with one of my friends and thought about this moment. And I've retold this one story to people about it. And it was around somebody learned a really great lesson about diversity and inclusion on, and like how to really apply that in real life. And the person who I learned this lesson from had no idea I learned it from them. I was in a meeting with like 50 people. I was listening to her talk to other people about it. And she had no idea, but I had retold this story multiple times. I had shown up differently multiple times to meetings, to events, to conversations with people because of the lessons that I learned from her, because of what she taught me. She had no idea that happened, right? It was that lollipop moment from the TED Talk we referenced a few episodes ago. And as I was telling the story recently, I was like, you know what? I should tell her this, right? Like I should let her know that she greatly impacted my life, that she was an important person to me. And so I did. I sent her an email and I said, hey, you don't know me, but here's the situation. Here's the story. I was recently telling somebody this, and I just wanted you to know how much you showed me what diversity and inclusion in action really looks like, and how big of a difference that's made for me as a person, as a leader, as a coach, as just a human being in general. And it sparked this really great, little back and forth. It was just a couple of emails, but it was one of those things where it was so lovely to invest in somebody in that way, to not leave anything unsaid, right? And to do that. And then the thing that I thought of, right? So that happened, and then laid off a few weeks later, maybe a month later. And it was one of the things I was so happy that I hadn't let that unsaid, right? I hadn't walked away without telling her how important she really had been in a way that she didn't even know about. And to me, that really like put that day into the masterpiece category, right? I did it. I left those, I didn't leave those words on the table. I put them, out there into the world and really said how somebody impacted. And so I think that for me, this part really resonated in the thought process of, right, we're not guaranteed tomorrow. We're not even guaranteed next hour. And so right now is your moment, right? Make today your masterpiece, make each day your masterpiece. And to do that, it's that connection with people, and it's telling people what they mean to you, telling people how you think of them, because those are the things and those are the stories that people carry forward with them. That helps, right? The stories that people tell us about ourselves help us figure out what our purpose in life is, help us figure out what our passions are, right? Where are we really good? And I only find that out because other people have given me that feedback and that story. And so you're not just giving them that direct compliment, you're also building the story for them of the impact they have on your life. What do I really do for people? And it's in people being brave enough to not leave anything unsaid, to tell me those words, or for me to tell other people those words. So I love that that's the way the chapter ends, is if you want to make your masterpiece, don't leave anything unsaid. Let people know what they, as you think about it, right? Don't make it complicated. Just let them know. Just tell them. Even if it's out of the blue, it doesn't matter. Those are the things that we love, right? I love the random text that's like, hey, I was just thinking about you. Or, hey, I'm so excited about this. Or, hey, I literally am looking at a text that came in 19 minutes ago that says, I was literally just thinking about you and I saw your update on LinkedIn. Like, I'm super excited for you. I love that. That makes me so happy. And that's somebody investing in me, right? And that's somebody that I invested time in, and other people invested time in. And, it just creates this, wonderful space to be in.
I love that you just said, Sam, that it first takes being brave. because it may be something that you don't want to say, or that you're scared to say, or that you've been putting off saying, or that you're just nervous about saying. Like, there's been plenty of times that I'll say to the kids, or especially to Olivia, oh my gosh, that person has the most beautiful smile. And she will stand up, call the person over to wherever we are, and just say, I just want to let you know how beautiful your smile is, or how radiant your energy is. And it makes that person's day. But to make your day a masterpiece takes action, right? Like, you have to make it. You have to be the one with the paintbrushes and the paint that is going to make this day the masterpiece. And my gosh, I can think of just so many songs that we could talk about, like Elton John, Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me. Like, don't wait for tomorrow if tomorrow's not going to come. You know, Annie, tomorrow, I'll love you tomorrow, but what about today? Or Ziggy Marley talks about give a little love, and Annie Lennox and Al Green talk about put a little love in your heart. In fact, in that song, the one by Annie Lennox and Al Green, which is really by Jackie DeShannon, there's a verse that says, put a little love in your heart. That's actually the chorus over and over and over again. But it says, if you want the world to know, then you put a little love in your heart. The world will be a better place for you and for me. Take a good look around. And if you're looking down, put a little love in your heart. I hope when you decide kindness will be your guide, put a little love in your heart, and the world will be a better place. The world will be a better place for you and for me. And so when John and Pat, through his authorship, end this chapter, the last sentence of the chapter says that you make each day your masterpiece by living wisely, by living effectively, by living joyfully, and by living to invest each day of your life in the people around you. And phew, wow. I mean, Sam, we still have only just explored 3 of 7 principles. I've already had some very profound mind and heart change reading this book with you. And in a recap, John's dad left a legacy that he lived out that got deposited into other people. He talked about being true to yourself, which is the first principle, helping others, the second principle. We're ending today on making each day your masterpiece. And next time we go into a principle that's so dear to my heart, which is about drinking deeply from good books, especially the Bible. And regardless of what people think or believe, books on your shelf can make a big difference. I talked about The Alchemist and the big difference that made for me through the deposit of someone making a masterpiece of a day for my son. So when I think about accountability going into the week ahead and making each day a masterpiece, I think for me, I'd like to be able to take a look at what is the blank canvas and what I want it to look like at the end of the week. So what opportunities can I have to make the week colorful? Who can I reach out to that maybe I haven't reached out to in a while and just share how grateful I am for them? And also to be brave about saying things that maybe have been left unsaid. And so I think that's what I'm going to take into my accountability for the week. How about for yourself?
I love that. I love that. I love all your musical references too. Like, it's awesome. For me, the thing that really sparked as you were talking and things like that is I recently went to a meeting of like local business owners, and I've been nervous about, I don't know, just connecting and like meeting with people, but I'm going to reframe that, and I'm going to really think about it as, how can I invest myself in other people, right? Like, what could that look like? Because I've got something to give people. We all do, right? So I'm gonna reframe this space that I'm a little intimidated, a little nervous about, and I'm gonna frame that around investing in other people and see what that does for me, and see if that can step me into a more empowered, excited place, and see what masterpieces we can paint from that. So
that sounds awesome. That sounds amazing. Well, I'm looking forward to sharing our schools of thought together as we continue to explore the book. and learn how to lead the game well. If you have not yet subscribed to our podcast, we encourage you to do that. We're on anywhere that you normally listen to your podcast. And if there's somewhere you're listening and you can't find us there, let us know. You can reach out to us on our LinkedIn page, which is called School of Thoughts Publishing. Thanks for joining us today. My name's Denise Russo, and on behalf of my friend Sam Powell, thank you for once again joining us through the book Coach Wooden by Pat Williams and What's on Your Bookshelf. Have a great day, everyone.